Alright, so look, quote unquote woke games, as certain people will call them, don't actually exist. In fact, the people who use that kind of terminology in this day and age tend to be some of the worst people imaginable. Much like a lot of slang that's been co-opted by groups of people and thus created bastardized meanings, the term woke was coined by black Americans. Dating as far back as the 1930s, the term was first used by American folk and blues singer Leadbelly when he was interviewed about a song called the Scottsboro Boys.
I made a song about down there, so I advise everybody to be a little careful when they go along through that, but stay woke, keep their eyes open.
The song was based on a story about 9 black teens falsely accused of rape by an all-white jury. The song was intended to inform black people of the injustices around them and to keep an eye out. Woke was cultural shorthand, a reminder within black communities to stay awake to systemic racism, oppression, and injustice. It wasn't a weapon, and it was most certainly not some kind of dog whistle. It was something most white Americans can't even begin to fathom. It was survival, and that's what people don't get. Much like how cancel culture or political correctness were twisted beyond recognition, woke was solely hijacked and rebranded by people who neither understood its roots nor cared to. Emphasis must be placed on nor cared to. Until we got to the point where people who have never had to stay awake a day in their lives think they're experts on the word. I say that because for anyone here who came to this video with intolerance already in their heart, I have a question. Can you even remember why and how woke got put into the mainstream? Well, see, this rebrand didn't happen overnight. It took a perfect storm. Social media, outrage culture, and white America discomfort collided all at once. Woke, as white America knows it, became part of the cultural zeitgeist around 2014. If you dig a bit deeper, you can see that 2014 was the same year Michael Brown and Tamir Rice were killed by Timothy Lehman and Darren Wilson.
And reaction to the decision not to charge Officer Darren Wilson was almost violence by some of the crowd. Cleveland officials are appealing for calm today after a grand jury decided not to indict two police officers in the killing of a 12-year-old boy on the playground. Protesters hosted on Monday night.
To stay aware of police brutality, bias, and injustice system that have never been for black people. It trended because black activists were warning each other that in ignorance costs lives. It's within these social conditions that which white American first noticed the word, and once they paved the way for certain people years later to do what they always do. They owned it.
Oh, it's time to that we have to put up with feminism and wokeness. You can't just get a normal game. That sounds like we say the same thing over and over, but it really is the truth.
Woke is the forced inorganic inclusion of certain token minorities and groups in order to score DEI and ESG points.
And then they went to the seats.
And that's what DEI does. It promotes prejudice. To look at someone of a different race and have prejudice on that person.
I think that if Elon Musk did Nazi salutes every single day, they still would radicalize as many people as stuff like this does.
See, this is the pipeline. Redefine it. That's how one will stay awake to you're ruining video games. Understand this. Woke was never created bred by awareness and they want to benefit from everyone else that is not resisting the
This is the best you got. This is the best you can do. Like Gil Buckman, trying to make characters as unattractive as possible. You know, it's going to be Dubstep wasn't a samurai. He was a legend. Dubstep was never a samurai, but a documented entertainer. So we and was he a samurai? For those who don't know, Yasuke was a real figure and a English retainer. あるいは苦しいことちゃんとあったのもあったんですけど、自分が
Which was
this is not the right thing is that it's something. And I remember that at the time that we about a live problem and I became the voice like everything I was doing. Like a woman
in the fear since it's a component so the game or customization is literally a feature. That's let you customize your character since the first game. And you know, before we move on to the next section, I just have to say, none of this is really about video games. It's about control for these people. When people say they're forcing diversity or this is woke, what they actually mean is I'm not used to sharing space. Keep my politics. Please don't let me think about the world outside my own comfort zone. Their outrage is something privilege being mistaken for window supremacy and censored all of their life. And all of it was their nation. So, that shit is it's right. Not really. As always, supposed to rest is what some games from 84. Personally, I was born in '98, and some people believe me as a celebrity. Whether or not you give weight to that phrase, at best, agree with some of the same games and franchises as some of my older subscribers. And at worst, I have at least passing knowledge of some of the things. That being said, it literally took a couple of Google searches to see how video games always held some sort of mirror of the society. It was always and you can see as a kid, I knew about the political and economic standpoint. I want to break this section up into mini sections using some points from a certain old gaming list that we'll touch on later. But for now, I'll say this. This is a list of some of the worst people imaginable. Games, it tells you which game is woke and why they consider it. At first glance, it was the usual examples they give, but trust me, this list gets pretty fucking egregious. But for now, we'll focus on some points that weren't commonly touched on. First off, we have the presence of minority groups, Hell, but you and I would both be idiots to ignore how rageful some white gamers become when black people dare to just exist. Can anyone say yes anyway? That's what that means as a group stories. That's right for the games. Maybe even one of the best games of that era. That being Land of Fire and San Andreas. So from this list, we touch on minorities, so I'm not going to dive deep into this whole game. We're going to dive into the opening scene of this game. Afterwards, I'm sure you've all seen at least one. After a call from his brother saying that their mom is dead, main guy, Carl Johnson, is seen heading back to his old stomping grounds after being in Liberty City for 5 years. Almost immediately arriving, he, a black man, is harassed by the police, met with guns, and the death of his quote-unquote drug money. He's framed for murder, blackmail, forced to better frame his name. More like and I think it's now Eric this game takes place in the subsequent riots that also took place in Los Angeles, specifically the South Central area, the very place San Andreas takes place. Now, what are just corrupt cops using unnecessary force, illegal tactics like blackmail, led to the framing I don't see any reason as to how they had due cause for stopping him. The game shows in its intro the tip of the iceberg that is not only the racial tensions, but the systemic issues in our police system. Notice how the lead cop in this group is a black man, and his two partners are a white man and a Hispanic man. This is essentially saying that the police status essentially controls the race. The system of oppression, long layer, and transcend race and such a layered intro. I'm Sure, so it's out there, man, right? They say people play games like this where they say that CJ was wrong instead of just cooperated. And these guys were just doing their jobs. Regardless, within the first 10 minutes, this game reflects their real world. However, it's lost on some moments it's amazing. We also have a weird fascination with people like George Floyd and mocking his death. But let us say something about Charlie Kirk. I'm wrong, right?
There he is.
Anyway, he's not so best friend characters in game. That being the Aboriginal Telltale's The Walking Dead. Now, there isn't much to say about him and how he reflects the real world per se, but Lee is a character that just happens to be black. See, he's a minority that doesn't have any deeper implication. He can just exist to grasp. If we expand into the movie territory for a bit and into the weirdo fan base that is Star Wars, the fan reaction to one roast ego absolutely disgusting. The character is just Last Jedi. And listen, I remember people online being so upset that she was Asian. Now, speaking as someone who is partially Korean, this made me feel a little bit. For space to midichlorians. See, Lee represents representation without expectation. He doesn't have to be a method of conveying systemic and institutional racism. He doesn't have to be a shining example of black excellence. In fact, he literally could be a character professor, to people to his dad, they could have easily been a man, like the mid scenes before change. He is a multi-dimensional character. If anything, he tells a tale that might get you Jane Miller. But anyway, for this section, we touch on a character near and dear to many black Latino kids across the world. One who not only inspires hope on their generation, but acts as a physical manifestation of representation, that being Miles Morales. Now, I genuinely cannot remember the first time I even got introduced to Miles Morales, but being the lifelong Spider-Man fan that I am, making Spider-Man who made me look like me was so cool. And listen, again, I'm a lifelong Spider fan. I saw the first Raimi movie in theaters, and I was like 4 years old. With that being said, I didn't see myself as Spider-Man because he was wearing a mask, so it didn't even matter really. I saw a cool superhero with a cool mode of transportation, powers, and I loved him. I would think it's not because of his race, but because he was simple. The nuance of why didn't happen so much later. But when I found out about Miles, I saw the kid in the mirror before the Spider-Man pajamas. I saw myself. And I think for some white people, Miles comes off like a threat to Peter, and he just isn't. He's not a besmirchment of the Spider-Man name, rather an extension. The same way little white kids saw themselves in Peter, Miles is that same joy in millions of black and Latino kids. See, it's not about taking it's so much worldview. It's about being able to see you represented, to see your favorite hero reflected back at you. Now, yes, I do think it's a bit weird to make certain characters black for no reason, but notice I said certain. Characters like Nick Fury or Domino have their race as a negligible aspect of their being. That being said, a black Kal-El or a black Bruce Wayne would indeed feel forced, but a black Superman or a black Batman could indeed work and would provide millions of black fans with representation. Now you might be saying, make your own characters, and original black superheroes exist too, but you also split on them too, so something like that. See, Miles exists in a weird space. He's a legacy character, one that gets a lot of love, but it's funny, I mean, I'm making lanterns, flashes, nobody ever uses those mantles. Is it perhaps that Miles is interesting? In fact, the people who hate Miles simply because he's black are also part of a legacy mantle. That mantle being race. Now you may say, June, Miles isn't a well-written character, and that be the case in some instances. But one, Peter has some steady storylines too, as does any superhero. You have to give them time to find the best way to write the character. And two, a good amount of times when people say, I just want good writing, or anything to that effect, it's they use that person's plausible deniability to say racist thing without getting black. But we'll touch more on that later. See, Miles for me almost acts like I still have yet to receive a well thought out reason I stand by. Regardless, Miles represents the shit both from spiritual like least from CJ, but that's one of the most iconic characters and reflecting the racial fictional communities. Spider-Man quote-unquote fans say Peter is Spider-Man and Miles Morales is Miles Morales. Again, another dog whistle. But now, let's talk about some games. So almost certainly my first real introduction to pro LGBTQ themes in game was the same game that most people would cite, and that would be the Sims franchise. Now I first got my introduction to the Sims with Sims 2 on the PS2, but even back in the first game, it was indeed possible to be a member of the Rainbow Gang. Literally, I can't find any backlash about people disliking the LGBTQ aspects of this game, and honestly, I'm willing to bet that I get a better right with homophobes who played some version of the Sims growing up and probably kissed the dude as a guy themselves just to, see if they could, right? See, this was such a non-issue. This was just seen as a normal and keyword optional part of the game. Flirting, kissing, wooiness, and the same sex was integrated flawlessly, and it just worked. And there's not much to say about it here. It was a game, man. But you may be saying, but June, real gamers don't play The Sims. That's a female game, right? And I tell you to shut the fuck up because it doesn't make any fucking sense. But I'd also bring up another game loaded by about 95% of gamers. That being Rockstar's Bully. Now, Bully is a game near and dear to many people's hearts for a myriad of reasons. To the music, the atmosphere of the school, to the memorable characters, Bully is considered a cult classic to many gamers. But there's a core mechanic in the game that lets you, as Jimmy, the main character, kiss other boys. And you know what? Good for bro. But no, this was again such a non-issue, and I put it to bed 2 days. One, gamers didn't even know this mechanic was in the game because it was optional and not required. And two, nobody back then really gave a fuck. So why is that? This one's my life freshman year and made my way to college. That being Mass Effect. This one is a bit similar in how they portray LGBTQ relations in that, like The Sims, it's sort of this is optional implementation. Literally, if you weren't gay or lesbian or whatever, you would probably never find out about the gayness of this game. Which makes me wonder, apart from the internet, how exactly do these guys know that's even in the game? My point being, I don't think anyone gave a f that you could f Caden on the Normandy and make Joker's job as a pilot even harder. But no, with all that being said, I want to point to the Asari as well. See, the Asari are a race that presents like a female human. They're monogendered, and some of their speech patterns reflect that.
My species is monogendered. Male and female have no real meaning for us. We still require a partner to reproduce. This second parent, however, may be of any species and any gender.
The Asari represent a weird dissonance between some gamers. See, for all intents and purposes, the Asari are pretty sexy. They are in fact sexualized in a very cisgender heterosexual way.
Young males have an unhealthy obsession with my species.
And I think that alone protected any potential backlash they might have gotten back then. So I think if this game came out now, like not just the remastered packs, but if Mass Effect as a whole came out now in the present day, one of two things would happen. The anti-woke crowd would either love the Asari and say cringe like, take that, libtards, games are sexy again. Or like call it woke for making them all women and say things like, go woke, go broke. Or they're trying to push an agenda here, and the most heinous of them would make these mods to make every one of them male for some reason. Much like how they modded Will from Baldur's Gate to be white, and that's a whole other issue I don't even want to touch upon because that's weird. People acted as if his race had anything to do with his character as a whole, which is just insane. But side note, right? You can have a 6-foot-tall dragon man in your game, but not a black person. That to me is the most fragile shit I've ever heard of. Sure, there might be a bunch of hate sometimes, but we're crying over human rights and representation and inclusion in our favorite dystopia. They're crying about traditional same-sex games. Shut the fuck up! Shut up! But no, the Asari are actually a pretty good segue into the next section. The Asari, well, probably not the to me, can be read as transgender. It has a metaphor for gender, and while not a perfect one to play out, these new seeds of challenge are to present themselves to the world. The earliest instances of that video games, to my knowledge, would have been the Street Fighter franchise. Now, Poison is an interesting character, and that although she is canonically trans, the origins of her being trans is a bit problematic. The original idea of Poison was to make female enemies for the Final Fight series, but the staff became worried mid-production that because the game is built around beating up enemies, the feminist groups would sue the company for the game encouraging the player to beat up women. So, as a weird safety measure, they specified that Poison was transgender in the game's manual, as a way to sidestep that issue. Now, like I said, yikes, but now, according to the devs, her gender is left up to interpretation, so I guess you could say she is a biological woman. However, in the modern day, Poison is mostly recognized by fans as a transgender woman. Now, this was back in the 1980s. The body trans people was pretty important. It's obviously disgusting, but in the modern day, Poison is a relic of a time that didn't understand people like her, but again now, she's mostly seen as a transgender woman. Now, I'm not trying to twist some lot of really absolutely pretty trans people or be some kind of spokesperson around the community, especially given her origins. So, please help me comment on your feelings about her and how you view her if you are for how you view. But hey, while the people are exactly, look at Poison really quick. So I'm you not cracking that? It's second anyway. I want to talk about this. That Saints Row series. So I know people mostly played Saints Row 2 for their first introduction into the series. It's actually a pretty decent starting off point, so I can't talk a bit about that. But anyway, this is more of a technical point more than anything, and one that I think is more of a headcanon example, but still I think it holds up. See, this game came out today, ET woke up, let me see, Saints Row 1, then why can't you get the fan? There's no option to part of this game. But fast forward to Saints Row 2, and you're suddenly given the option to become a woman. Now look, this could be chopped up to being used up better hardware and tech, but still, none of this thing as you were in the first game. And the game got continues to let you have that option. Nobody, and I mean nobody, gave a damn about this feature, either out of ignorance from the first game or because Monty is busy smacking people in the second game. Like I said, if this game came out today, oh, in reality, the gender/sexuality adoption was such a non-issue. It was optional. They want to speak about a game that I loved last year because there's genuinely nothing like it at the moment. That game being Baldur's Gate 3. There isn't much to talk about here. But on that list, they said that Baldur's Gate 3, because of the option of body type instead of gender, like other people, it's... Now listen, Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the best games I've ever played. And I dare say that even if you can't get a D&D session going in real life, this game is the next best thing. Now, as we all know, Baldur's Gate is basically D&D, but you have elves and tieflings and dwarves and gnomes and etc. etc. D&D is literally the ultimate power fantasy. The name of the game here is customization and imagination. So why is it so off-putting to people that some people wouldn't go by male or female pronouns? And even then, nobody stopped you from using preferred body type and pronouns.
What's your name, age, pronoun?
Man, I'm a native pronoun. There is now no pronouns. You're getting pronouns.
So you don't use pronouns at all?
My pronouns is a man that doesn't respect me.
Okay, so do you use pronouns, yes or no?
Hell no.
Okay, so this is what I want you to do. For the rest of this stream, I will accept that you don't use pronouns, okay? I got it. If you use a pronoun, okay? If you use a pronoun, you will hear this sound.
Let's go with let's go with...
Careful there. You said the word you is a pronoun. So just remember you don't use pronouns, okay? Sorry, you just used the word you again. Let's see. Again.
Nah, no pronoun.
Can you see the stream?
No.
So I'll just do this for everybody
Please tell me
watching
how
on
we
YouTube.
do
I'll just do this for everybody watching on YouTube. Now there are a couple types of pronouns. There are subject pronouns, possessive adjectives, possessive pronouns, and reflexive pronouns. You would be a subject pronoun.
They can become a fucking... I wanted to become Superman when I was younger, but, I grew up that.
You would be a subject pronoun, Coda. I don't know if you know this. If you don't, it's okay. Careful. Careful. That's another one. Careful. 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 Oh, there you go. Careful again. Oh, you. There's another pronoun. Be careful.
Not only do you feel decentered and like the spotlight was taken off of you, you want others to not feel included. The thing is, you're still included, you're just not the focus anymore. And ultimately, that's a good thing. White, straight, cis defaultism makes no real sense when a good amount of people who play video games simply aren't that. At some point, it's not woke to include these options, it's simply a good business move. That's why when you say shit like, go woke, go broke, it just comes off as a dog whistle to signify how much of a person you truly are. If you were so concerned about your favorite IP going broke, you see how inclusion is ultimately a good thing for sales. When something isn't bad simply because your identity isn't the main one reflected. If you miss out on a good thing that bonus gave you, simply because it includes the options of body types and pronouns, I genuinely feel sorry for you. Again, there isn't much to say about it. It's just a silly fucking reason not to play video games. With all that being said, I want to ask a serious question to the people who ironically use the word woke, especially when it comes to inclusion of women in media, and in this case, video games. How can you be attracted to women in real life, but hate the idea that a woman takes an important and or essential role in a given piece of media? For a group of mostly men who value traditional American ideologies, that of which focus on heterosexuality, getting pissed at the presence of women and them having central roles seems sort of gay. And it's funny because I know all of you fucking big titty goth girls, but you're not consuming the soft people like Asmongold spew. Let that same woman be a main character in a video game. You get mad publicly, then buy the game on Steam and download the first few mods you see. This is a whole other side rant, but why is it that game to be conventionally attractive? See, literally, when the Fable 4 trailer dropped, people got so up in arms about this character, and it's like, who fucking cares?
Like, I don't understand. I'll tell you this, right? I really don't understand the logic and, like, why would you make it a super ugly character? Like, why would you put a really ugly character in the trailer? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, nobody wants to look at an ugly person. Like, it doesn't make any, like, what's he doing? Like, nothing says female inclusion like making them ugly. It's so fucking ridiculous. What a world we live in.
You're focusing on the wrong shit here. Literally, we're getting a new Fable game. But because a character in the trailer doesn't get your inducer erectile dysfunction to move a couple centimeters, it's woke. Please go touch grass. Please. But anyway, I want to make a point about you, and not really, at your core, caring about women in video games. Remember when you first learned that Samus was a woman? Did you care then? Probably not. And if you didn't back then, you was corrupt and fell down the worst kinds of pipelines and retroactively labeled characters like Samus. And I'm sure if a game like Metroid came out now, with no amount of sexiness akin to a game like Stellar Blade, people would call it woke as a bit of a hypothetical for you, actually. Imagine a Metroid game came out today, and we had no indication that Samus was a woman. Her armor had no nerves, her voice was distorted, and she moved like a man. It would be praised by these woke types until we got to the ending, and she removed her helmet, and we found out that Samus was a woman. These people would struggle with such dissonance that would implode the YouTube scene. Videos with titles like, so is Metroid woke? Or, Metroid tricked me into liking wokeness? Or, why is Metroid afraid of being sexy? Or shit like that, you know? Listen, my first post on Samus was in Super Smash Bros. Melee. I literally had no clue Samus was a woman because of the reasons mentioned earlier. She wore armor that accentuated her body, she had no voice, and there was just no indication that she was a woman. And guess what? When I did find out that she was a woman, I thought, huh, that's cool. Even when I was a kid, I didn't care. Again, if this game came out today, right-wing incel red pill panda. But anyway, let's talk about a modern game that has a lot of people in a tizzy for some reason. That being Ghost of Yotei. I'm going to piss a lot of people off. I know it if I haven't already. And you know what? Good. The first game in this series, Tsushima, I don't know how to say it, is an amazing game. Its combat is layered without feeling overly complicated. The game's story is interesting and it looks amazing. What's not to like, right? Well, I'll say it. Jin Sakai is the most boring protagonist I've ever had the displeasure of playing as. He's boring as... Even when he goes against his code of being a samurai, he's still so without edge. It just feels like I'm playing a stock character. So when a sequel got announced, I was excited and hopeful they introduced some kind of regular protagonist. One who had even a modicum of personality. Obviously, we now know that Yotei features a woman as a protagonist. Her name is Atsu, and she's out for revenge against the killers who killed her parents as a child. And so many gamers, so many YouTubers were so pissed that we couldn't play as Jin Sakai again, and I'm left confused because who the f actually liked Jin as a character? Are you upset because he isn't playable? Or are you mad because the excuse is now a woman now? There's, to me, no real reason why this would piss you off. People say that she isn't a samurai and that it makes the game feel unrealistic. My brother in Christ, you're telling me one man can take down a fort of people trained in combat? Exactly, shut the fuck up. This game was never really about samurai in my opinion. It was about telling a story that introduced samurai once. The Ghost of franchise is more than samurai. It's about revenge. It's about honor.
This may not really come out.
But because people can't project white man Gary Sue onto Atsu, it's woke. These are the same people mad that Mary Jane can solo train guard without being Spider-Man. They clearly said that she's not trained for combat in the game, but because she's a woman, it's unrealistic. These people claim that Atsu should be able to solo groups of men, but like, it's a video game. It never claimed to be realistic. What are you actually talking about here? But you know what's it's not that. What's funny is that these people still bought the game. I will never understand gamers hating a game, but still buying it at full price, mind you. Because people get so mad when I tell them that they don't have to play a game that they know they'll hate. But call it FOMO, or just being bad with money. Point being, they still actively support a game they claim to hate. I don't understand it, man. And like, this being a new game, I'm already seeing people nitpick this game and call Atsu and Mary Sue. For example, this video where Atsu does the bamboo challenge and you're met with an extra piece of the minigame. And of course, people in the comments are already saying how much better they make it. These people are fucking exhausting. And listen, I went to bet they added that just to be cool. Like, the devs are probably thinking like, oh, you guys played the first game and you think you know what to expect, but we doing something you didn't expect, you know? And these folks only saw it as like a
What's that?
You know what that sounds like to me?
Oh shit. Okay, that explains why. Fuck.